We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.
Let's rock. If you're new to the tribe, we've got Rich behind the mix, Rad is across the table, and my name is Yanni Burmeister. We are Unity Gym, experts at turning driven people into athletes. This episode is brought to you by the Unify Movement System, the only online program balancing strength, flexibility, and fitness so you can unleash your inner athlete. Get daily coaching by us, plus both our Epic Gym and Home UMS programs. As a valued listener, use the link in the description to get your first month free. Before we get started, big warm welcome if you're watching on our YouTube channel. Remember to hit that like button. The more you like, the more people will see this great content, and subscribe if you like what you see. Now, we are super excited to announce that joining us today, we have Phil White from ADPT Physio and Tony Boutagy from tonyboutagy.com.
Yes, we do. And if you don't know who Tony is, Tony's a good friend of ours. He started work in the fitness industry in 1995, first as a personal trainer and sports coach, and then moved into roles that included education, academia, and strength coaching. These days, Tony splits his time evenly between coaching one-on-one in the gym and running educational courses on many topics to do with training, program design, and body composition. He holds a PhD in sports science and has written more than 65,000 training programs and coached elite athletes in around 30 different sports. Tony, it's a pleasure to have you on the show again. Welcome.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
And welcome, Phil. Thanks for joining us today, mate.
Always great.
Always great. So
sensational.
We've got a really juicy topic for today. Yanni, do you want to jump in and get us going?
Absolutely. So this is the 2021 Unity Gym Tribe Q&A podcast series where we asked you what you would like us to answer. And this question comes from Helen Madge from the UMS Online Coaching Group. She asks, are rest days really important? And couldn't I just switch from strength training to cardio as opposed to abstaining from exercise altogether? I think this is going to be a very, very important topic to cover. So let's first of all throw this to the physio in the room. Let's throw this to Phil and get your take on exercise recovery, because you're training for triathlon at the moment. And there was actually a second tail to this question that I got rid of. Helen asked, how do professional athletes do it? How do they rest? How do they recover? As though there might be something very different that they're doing or very special. So first of all, you could give us some insight. And I know that Tony also is very much into your triathlons, aren't you? So you can probably give us some good insight from a semi-professional standpoint.
Yeah, I'm definitely far from professional in triathlons. Like, my background's in team sports. I played 11 years of ultimate frisbee competitively, like international level of that. And then I've dabbled in powerlifting, and I've done training with the Unity guys, and now a bit of beach volleyball and surfing. And now it's been great over the last little while to get really stuck in a triathlon. And of all the sports I've ever done, it's been just such an interesting one for figuring out how to fit it all in, because there's not only the swimming, cycling, and running. I'm training for a half Ironman, but then also you're getting strength work in there, and this program we're doing also then chucks in a bit of mobility work, and then some mindset training, which has been quite good as well. But just the sheer logistics of trying to fit in like multiple sessions a day, while also trying to have a life as well, has been definitely very challenging. And it's really interesting from a recovery side of thing, because this question is great from Helen, because it's one of the most common things that I get as a physio is people are like, they sort of think that there's going to be, like, in an injury perspective, they often think there's going to be one silver bullet exercise. It's going to be the exercise that they've not been doing, that once they do it, their body will work perfectly. And they often think that any exercise that I then prescribe that they should do is, like, different types of people. Some people will just not do the exercises at all, but there's a lot of the Unity members are like very committed to their training. Will be like, great, I'm going to do it every day, twice a day. No, we've got to get a better understanding of the bigger picture and realize that exercise, is I explain it like exercise is like a medicine. If you take the right amount, then you're going to get a good result, but you can most certainly overdose. So, getting the recovery side is so key for optimal performance. So, yeah, I mean, I could keep going down the rabbit hole, but I'll throw this over to Tony.
And I guess if we just to circle back to Helen's question, I do think that Helen is specifically referring to
strength versus cardio.
Yeah, recovery for a strength training program. So if you're doing resistance training, Do you need recovery days, or can I just do cardio instead of abstaining from exercise altogether?
Yeah, and this concurrent training being training for strength and cardio together, I think is just such an interesting one, because you talk to strength people and they everyone's experts in kind of specificity, and so there's not too many people who really bridge the gap and have that good marriage of doing both together. And I'm excited to hear Tony's perspective as someone who likes his endurance work, but has worked with some amazing strength athletes. So I'm going to be taking notes on this one, I think.
Well, we've got recovery and we have rest, and they mean different things. That would be point one. Point two is it depends on what kind of end goal you want to achieve. If you are an athlete, then you've got lighter days, both for the brain and for your body, to absorb the heavier and the quality training earlier in the week. But that could be walking, or it could be yoga, or it could be a recovery ride. And we call that recovery training, as opposed to rest, which really is lying on the couch. And the reason why athletes use rest as opposed to just using recovery is that even when you're doing recovery, you're still using your slow twitch muscle fibers. When you perform high intensity work, weight training, effort work, interval work, you're using all muscle fibers, slow twitch and fast twitch. And then when you perform low intensity work, then your fast twitch fibers are recovering while you're still exercising, and you get blood flow and muscle fiber recruitment, but it's all of the slow twitch type. So that's where recovery comes in, and that's why athletes use recovery. But even during recovery sessions, you're still using slow twitch muscle fibers. So it's important, and elite athletes know this, to have complete rest where you're off your legs, off your body, and that gives your slow twitch fibers a chance to recover. So the very best athletes will typically take one full day off a week or a fortnight where all muscle fibers are forced to recover. So it's not just recovery days, it's also rest days. So Helen, it depends on what you really want to get out of training. Because if a client wants body compositional changes, then we tend to not really have rest days. We have recovery days where you do some very light, it could be some swimming or some walking, give your body, brain a rest. But the full recovery of slow twitch fibers is not particularly important, because you just want to remain active, because energy expenditure is a big goal. But if you're an athlete and you're really revving the system and you're doing interval work or lifting weights, then you do need rest days to fully let all muscle fiber types get their rest as well.
Yeah, I think personally for me, when I'm training the way that my programming intends me to, which is 5 days a week doing 2 sessions a day where I'm doing a lot of mobility and skill-based work in the morning, things like handstands and light acrobatics. And then in the afternoon, I'm doing a strength session, doing that Monday to Friday, and then a sort of shorter combined version of both on Saturday. I find that if I don't have a rest day where I literally, there is not only is there no intention to do any exercise, there's an intention to not even walk anywhere if I can get away from it. That if I don't do that, I really feel it. It just starts to catch up with me within a couple of weeks. And I also find that I really enjoy that rest day when I'm training to that kind of a level. It's something that I look forward to, where I can just feel really good about sitting around and just not really doing much at all, except maybe taking my son to the park and watching him run around and play.
There's an argument to say that when you've got young kids, you don't really ever get a rest day.
I do my best.
But you do get recovery days where it's just chasing after kids or entertaining kids. But I certainly agree. And it also, I think what you mentioned there about revving the engine, it also, you really need to consider the intensity that you're reaching during your training sessions, because there are a large majority of people that train regularly, but they don't really train hard. In comparison to an athlete that's really pushing to the point where they've and their bodies are very conditioned, so that what they can take their bodies to is superior to what most average people can. So that has to be considered too, I guess.
I'm really bad at remembering study names, but I remember when I was studying my sports science degree, looking at a study where it was looking at professionals versus kind of elite versus recreational runners and looking at their total training time and training load, and then matching that with their total training intensity. And it's like, it was the case that the elite and the professionals would be training about the same amount of time, the same sort of volume, but they'd just never be able to hit that peak intensity because then they had to go to work during the day. They wouldn't, looking after the kids, they had lots of other stresses that meant they couldn't recover. So you're not able to hit that same training peak intensity, which then gets you to progress forward. So I think it was a really common thing when I was working with a niche of some ultramarathon runners who would just be training hours and hours and hours, but they would just like hit this wall and be like just having real troubles with injuries. Whereas some of the professionals that I worked with, like they would be doing crazy hours, but then they'd just be chilling, eating, sleeping, taking it easy for the rest of the day. And so, yeah, I think it's such an important one for people to realize that like you just can't burn all the candles at once. Like you've got to, pick what your real goals are and then, spend your energy accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've actually got a question for Tony, which is something that I, when I'm training the way that I intended to, and I keep saying that because, there's just periods of time where my best intentions just aren't being met, and the work-life balance sort of gets a little bit in the way of what my training goals are. But if I am doing it the right way, I have done a little bit of looking into the idea of planned deload weeks versus unplanned deload week. And I have, in my current training, I have 2 planned deload days a week. So Friday and Saturday is a reduced volume day down to about 40% of volume of Monday to Thursday, and then Sunday being a rest day. But then I'll also have an unplanned deload week sometimes when I can feel like I'm in a state of overreaching. And what I mean by being in a state of overreaching is when inexplicably I cannot perform to the same level and the same intensity that I could the week before, when recovery is unchanged and sleep is unchanged. What are your thoughts on that, Tony? On which, I guess, in layman's terms, I'm saying listening to your body. And if you are training and you're really going for it, and you have this plan of this ambitious 6-day a week training split, listening to your body, where you are looking at, oh wow, last week, like if we just use a weightlifting number, for people to be able to wrap their head around this easily, but if you were doing 100 kilogram back squats for 5 reps for 5 sets, and now you go into this session and in your warm-up set you're really struggling to even get past 90 kilos. What's your take on unplanned and planned deloading?
Yeah, I'm a fan, and I think every coach is, of listening to your body or using a metric that measures internal stress to guide the training periods of more volume intensity, less volume intensity. And this is the intuitive or auto-regulated periodization that's been around for decades. During rest is where the body makes the adjustments from all the training that you've been doing. So often rest is viewed as a wimpy term, but you have to balance training and rest to reach a fitness goal. But sometimes we'll accumulate too much stress, and not just training stress. It could be lifestyle, work, relationship, but it's all stress to the body. And ultimately the body will fail to absorb that and make positive adaptation. And you can listen to your body, and failing to reach numbers that that you should reach is a sign that you should shut the book on your training log of the day and just go home, or do some think on the fly and do more restorative training, some more flexibility, or some zone 2 or steady state work, just to let the body restore itself. But the idea that you should just push through it for your mental capacity is not a great idea, because it means that you're failing to absorb the training load, and you're going to further exacerbate that problem. So for my clients, we use heart rate variability as a guide. And if we've planned a hard training session, legs or intervals, and the heart rate variability data suggests that you should either have a rest day or a light recovery day, then we listen to the metrics. And studies show that this is a better way of planning your loading and deloading rather than just following the schedule.
Just with the practicalities, heart rate variability is something that I've been going deep into since getting into triathlon training. Are you doing morning readings with a heart rate belt on a heart rate app, or are you taking the metrics like body battery from Garmin, or using sort of certain readings from Oura Rings? Like, do you have what's the way you implement that?
Yeah. So I use, for ease and with no affiliation, I use an Oura Ring. But for any athlete, it's the morning heart rate variability that we want. So for those who don't have an Oura Ring, we just use simply heart rate variability for training, HRV for training, and you use your finger on the light on your camera, and you measure a minute every morning on waking. And that data is as good as anything. And that will guide, once you've got rolling averages, because you need to compare you with you over the days, it will be able to say, right, you're having a great day, so that's where you're going to do your hard session, or you should really dial it back. And for anyone with kids, or enjoys a glass of wine, or has a stressful job where stress accumulates over the week, you'll soon realize that you can't do your quality sessions on Thursday or Friday. Yeah. You're better off doing that on a Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, after testing a lot of apps, I ended up on HRV training as well, and finding that fingerprint reading was definitely just to fit it in. Like, I have the heart rate belt, and I was doing different apps, but I found that way just getting it done in the morning is great.
Yeah. What's that app?
Yeah. So I think everyone accepts that HRV for training leads the technology.
Yeah.
So I think that's the easiest and best to use.
Yeah, and so with that app, what you do is you get the reading, which is going to be the objective data, but it also has a subjective questionnaire, which asks you a bit about how you're feeling and what's happening with your training. Do you kind of weight the objective versus subjective as highly, or do you preference?
Yeah, I ignore it, but it really is individually specific. So if you are somebody who is very in touch with themselves and can monitor aches and pains and sleep quality and so forth, then that's great. I'm not interested. I just want to know what my HRV is, and then I can plan accordingly.
Do you want to quickly explain HRV for people who haven't heard of that before?
Sure. So when we look at our heart rate, and if the heart rate were to say 60 beats a minute, you would think that you have one beat every minute, but it's not the case at all. The heart beats asynchronously. So one a little more than a second, one a little bit less than a second, and one on the second. And it's been known now for quite some time that the degree of asynchronicity of our heart is a sign of the health of our parasympathetic nervous system. So we want a degree of high variability, differences of where our beat is, and it's not on the second. And the more variability we have, the greater in this instance, our recovery and the health of our parasympathetic nervous system. When we're stressed, sleep deprived, and unable to absorb training loads based on how much we're doing and how much we can absorb it, then our heart becomes very synchronized. And that shows with a heart rate variability number that drops. So it is a very studied area in science, both from health, but in our area, our ability to tolerate and positively adapt to training. So for such a simple $10 app, it gives such an insightful view into how well you're tolerating your training.
I want to just finish up on making a really big point of highlighting the different influences that can affect heart rate variability, because most people will be listening to the podcast and thinking and just considering the exercise stimulus and the stress that is essentially exercise is stress for the body that we get a positive adaptation to, which you mentioned before. But what a lot of people that I've found over my sort of 18 years, 20 years plus coaching people don't consider is the different stress mechanisms in the life that can have a huge effect on that. And most people, when they turn up to the gym, want to just go 100% because they want to make the most of the time. And I think it's really important that we highlight this, that the training stimulus will simply not be absorbed well if you've got all these different sort of stress responses occurring from, it can be anything from financial, relationship, work related, sleep deprivation, what's going on at home with your kids, through to how much you're exercising. What are your thoughts on that, Tony, and how do you communicate that to your clients?
Yeah, I think most modern day personal trainers don't read enough of coaches who've gone before them across different disciplines. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The coaches of the past have already done the work for us, and we just need to stand on their shoulders and apply that to our specific field. You can't train hard multiple days in a row. Coaches have said for decades, alternate hard and easy days, because stress is stress, whether it's heat or cold stress, whether it's food stress, so caloric restriction or eating, a weight training stimulus, aerobic stimulus. It's just stress that just sends the signal in slightly different directions. But you can't get a positive result for fitness by adding stress on stress on stress. You need stress and then you need recovery, stress and recovery. And that's why coaches have always said alternate hard and easy days. So when you work with the general public who don't have the luxury of training and then resting for the rest of the day, which is what pro athletes will do, you got to go to work. You got to pick the kids up. You got to read the kids a bedtime story. You got work stresses. Then you got to look after your partner and family and aging parents. It's stress, 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 stress. So we have to understand periodization and have times where we push and times where we hold back, and maybe times of the year where it's more base building, and then times of the year which is more revving the engine, all in line with your own life circumstances. And using guides like HRV will help you to know whether you are tolerating your personal situation or whether you could actually ramp it up or whether you need to dial it back a little.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
there's awesome.
Like a bigger conversation, which we won't have now, but I think when you were talking about before with professional athletes and triathlons, maybe always pushing really hard, it's been really enlightening since getting stuck into this and looking at different styles of training. And it's just really made me appreciate the value of low intensity training. Like I would have never have gone out for a run or a cycle before and just gone at a kind of conversational pace or a pace where I could breathe with like through my nose. Like that's quite a low intensity. Like I'd never have done that before because I thought, oh, there's no real point of doing this. Like it's kind of not hard enough to get any big result. But since getting stuck into this, there's just so much value in, I guess on the physiological side with building the aerobic system, but also just it means you're then fresh to take on your harder sessions. Because if you're trying to hit those harder sessions again and again, you're just not going to hit the threshold for actually to get an adaptation. And it really makes you enjoy training more as well. Like, so value the easier stuff. Everyone listening, there's like
one of the silver linings of going under the knife so many times for reconstructive surgery is that you learn to value really low intensity training sessions.
And this is where the rule of 80-20 comes from. And Stephen Seiler is really credited for going through the training logs of the most successful athletes on the planet who've got longevity. So in other words, they weren't successful 1 year, they were successful over multiple Olympic cycles. And when he analyzed their training logs, 80% or so of the training was spent under the first lactate turn point. So really easy. And then 20% of their training week would be spent in the red zone. And this idea was, well, train easy on the easy days so you can train hard on the hard days. I was riding this morning with a age group cyclist. He's on a continental team, so a very good cyclist. And he's asking me to give some input into his training. So the first thing that I did was made sure his easy work was properly easy. So doing a lactate test, I was able to show where his power was before he hit 2 millimoles of lactate. And he didn't realize that it was so much less than what he was doing his easy rise at. And his feedback today after a month was, I can't believe how fresher I am and how much harder I can train when I do my effort work, because I'm doing my easy work easy and then my hard work hard. So, well, I'm glad you took the advice of a physiologist, because most continental riders or age groupers, they would just say, it's too easy.
Yeah, that's right.
And personally, it's, where it feels to me like we're talking a lot about, training adaptations related to strength development or endurance or performance. But Personally, I do a lot of training that involves skill, and when you're doing skill-based training and skill-based work like light acrobatics, the idea of that I always have to train to my peak is the best way to get injured. You really need those days where you're not trying to push yourself at all, but that adds to the neural pathways. It adds to the development of the skill when you're doing those lighter training sessions. And I've found it hugely beneficial to be training with that 80-20 principle as well.
Yeah, I think more personal trainers in the current age of online trainers need to do more work experience with seasoned veteran coaches who understand the push and pull of the training process, of knowing when to push, knowing when to dial it back, and having a plan in place, as opposed to, well, I'm going to train your glutes every day of the week as hard as we can.
And it's funny because the more experienced most coaches become, and even novice athletes like all of us here, and like what you've just said, Phil, like the further your training age goes along, the more you start to go, oh, there's some value in this. Maybe I should have listened to those people. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Tony. That was another really enlightening talk. And for those of you who are wanting to know how you can connect with Tony, Tony can be found on Twitter at Tony Boutagy, TonyBoutagy, for interesting articles he has read, or on Instagram at Tony Boutagy for more training related information. And remember that you can enroll in any of Tony's amazing coaching courses at tonyboutagy.com. Thanks again for joining us, Tony, and we really look forward to having you on another episode of the show in future. And thanks for joining us, Phil.
Thanks, guys.